Hey, what's going on, guys? So today we're talking about a Traptrix deck profile. This is my version of the deck. This is my take. Go ahead and let me know in those comments down below how you feel about this, different things like that. I actually did a poll a couple of weeks ago. You guys can go ahead and vote on that on my page if you'd like, about what kind of deck profiles you guys wanted to see. You want to see topping deck profiles, decks of your favorite archetypes, or just decks in general. And the overwhelming favorite was decks in general. So I'm just going to start busting out deck profiles. Kind of like the way the channel used to. If you guys have any decks that you want me to do, I saw someone talk about do the bug deck. I have the stuff coming from Photon Hypernova that's still coming in the mail. Once that arrives, I am going to have to play test it for a little bit, and then I'll do the bug deck profile. Last thing I'd want to do is just throw some random 40 cards together and throw it up on YouTube. I always try to make sure I play test my deck profiles and my decks as best as I possibly can to have the most optimized versions of every single deck. But without further ado, let's start with the monsters, starting with 3 copies of Traptrix Murmelio, 3 copies of Pudica, 3 copies of Mantis, 2 copies of Dionea, and 2 copies of Arachnocampia. I don't know if I said that right or not. As far as the ratios are concerned, you run 2 of these because it is searchable. Even though it is a really solid extender and it is a really good effect to play around Harpies, Lightning Storm, different things like that. And it's the reason why you don't have to run the Heavenly Sky Spirit 3,000 attack monster that reveals itself, that card. And it's a Traptrix monster, so that also helps your synergy there as well. But I just feel like it does get a little bit cloggy because it's not really that great of a normal summon. So that's why I'm only running it at 2. Dionea. Usually, when you have cards like Dionea that say special summon from the grave, you run them at 2 because obviously they need a card in the graveyard to do anything. But its secondary effect is actually really, really solid. So that is, it could definitely be a 3 of. Mantis, searching all of the Traptrix monsters is absolutely insane. The return effect isn't ever really relevant unless you have Sarah on board. When you have Sarah on board, now we can get our free trap holes just literally by adding a card and setting a card. And this deck's starting to get going is a little tough for this deck. But once this deck is going, it has a really solid late game. Traptrix Pudica helps with that out a lot as well. Adding the Garden, Traptrix Garden is super fantastic. But also its second effect is really good too, especially in this format where Cashier is the best deck. Being able to banish a monster with Xyz material, especially like the Cashier boss monster. There's a lot of monsters like Time 3 Freedoer as well that gain effects based on how many materials they have. If they have more, it's usually better. So the fact that this can banish one of those is just absolutely insane. But the first effect allows us to only play 1 copy of Garden, which is super big. And Murmelio, honestly, it's one of the oldest Traptrix and it's still really good. It's not, and since it's older, it's not a hard once per turn, which is super duper insane. And that's why that's sort of the ratios there. Kind of a heavier monster lineup, I would say. But I actually, I will be honest, I took a little bit from Team Sam's deck profile. So go ahead and check that out, where he was running a lot of extenders and hand traps, because you don't want to just heavily rely on set 4 pass type thing, like someone staring at pass. But 3 copies of Parallel Xyz. This card was actually being ran before the structure deck came out. It's just an absolutely fantastic card. Sarah points down, and almost, I think actually 2 of the Traptrix Xyz monsters are generic, and that's just super big. The fact that you can get a free Rafflesia is super big, but also you can go into like Baguska and Dweller, Redoer, and a bunch of different rank 4. Like the fact that this is one of the best rank 4 engines just in the game in general. And then for the hand traps, I am running 2 copies of Ghost Ogre, 2 Effect Veiler, and 3 Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. I actually think Ghost Ogre is really good right now. Once again, against Kashtira, a lot of times they like to use their monster's effects more than 1 time per turn. And so Ghost Ogre just says no. It's also pretty good against field spells, and field spells are always going to be really solid. Like Ghost Ogre's always been a really decent hand trap. I just think it's actually pretty good right now. Valor's also really good right now. Gets a lot of different things. And Ash Blossom back in the fray, really good against branded. But I am running these 7 hand traps as well as infinite impermanence. Obviously, you got to run infinite impermanence in this deck. So that's 10 hand traps. So just in case we do get blown out by a Harpies and we do get blown out by a lightning storm. Like in testing, I rarely had more than 3 or 4 set cards, and that might sound counterintuitive, but especially with Sarah's effect, you don't really want that many set cards. You want to make sure your back row is fully open, and this gives you just opportunity to play, just to play the game, even if you don't have that. 1 copy of Garden. It's usually the only spell card in Traptrix deck profiles. Deck doesn't really need any draw cards, so that's why there are no pot cards. I don't really think it needs any board wipes. You could probably get away with like a Raigeki or a Harpies or a Lightning Storm, but at the end of the day, Lightning Storm's actually really crazy in this deck, I will say. Because you do spend a lot of time with 1 or 2 monsters, it's very easy for your opponent to out them. And so a lot of times you'll end up with like 3 or 4 set cards in your back row. And so you can just play Lightning Storm because it says you can't have a face-up card, right? So Lightning Storm's actually pretty underrated in this deck. But that's it for the spells, just the 1. 3 copies of Holotea. Always try to use this. This is similar to like the Prime Monarch. If you play during Monarch format, always try to use it during your opponent's turn, the end phase of your opponent's turn, even if you don't have like a great play to set up. That way you can use it again during your turn. That's just kind of like a pro tip with that. This is a great starter card. This is a great extender. This is great everywhere, and it's searchable, which is even better. But that's it for that. I don't think this ratio is too super crazy, so that's why I did that one separate. But I am running 1 Nightmare, double Floodgate, double Gravediggers, 1 Bottomless, and 1 Terrifying. A lot of these are searchable, so you don't really need to run them in too many multiples. The reason I'm running Gravediggers and Floodgate in multiples, I think Floodgate's insane right now, because there's not really a lot of really good link decks. And Floodgate's only bad against link decks because you obviously can't put them in defense position. There's like the Mathmix Cyber stack. Mariness is okay. Floodgate's obviously not great against them, but it's good against Kashtira. It's good against the Mirror. It's not great against the Mirror because the Traptrix actually links them in a good amount. But it's good against Labyrinth to an extent because obviously it's a normal trap card. But it's also good against Branded. It's good against a lot like Sword Soul, a lot of different decks that don't rely too heavily on link monsters. And Gravediggers is just huge. Gravediggers might be a 3 of. The burn is actually really relevant in a deck like this because you do spend a lot of time with like minimal poking every now and again, and then boom, just kill your opponent with Gravediggers. A lot of decks have cards that activate in the graveyard, and a lot of decks are running hand traps. So Gravediggers is super big, super crucial there. And then as far as why I'm running these 1-ofs, a lot of decks have just monsters that fit the requirement of this card and it banishes. Bottomless is actually an insane card, but it's searchable, so that's why it's only at 1. We can reset with Dianea. And Traptrix Trap Hole Nightmare has always been one that kind of shows up every now and again. Treacherous is another interesting one, but it's really only good if you send it off for Flasia, because you're almost never going to not have trap cards in your deck, in your graveyard. For the generic trap cards, 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, 3 infinite impermanences. I noticed that a big issue with this deck, and obviously that was the point of. Obviously, that's the point of this. The era Kanakshi China, however you say the card's name. That's the point of that card, obviously, to make sure that you can save yourself from Lightning Storms and Harpies, Feather Dusters, and Twin Twisters. But if you don't get access to this card, or if you don't find the way to get to this card, you can just get to your Solemn Judgments. And Solemn Judgment's always live. And so that's why I love running 3 copies of Solemn Judgment, especially because a Harpies, Feather Duster is just so good against the deck. But also, too, I saw this in like an MCO40's video. He kind of devalued this deck because of Denko Sekka. Solemn Judgment plays around Denko Sekka. So like if your opponent summons a Denko Sekka, you can respond with Solemn Judgment because it's responding to the summon. So Denko's not technically on the board yet. So Solemn Judgment literally just plays around everything that possibly can counter this deck. And then Infinite Permanence kind of goes without saying. It's a trap-based deck. Sarah, wants infinite permanence to be played, so that's pretty cool. I didn't take this to an event, so no side deck or anything crazy like that. But for the extra deck, 3 copies of Traptrix Sarah. I debate between 2 or 3 a lot. You have to run at least 2. This is just the best engine. Whole tail can summon it back out. But what's also cool too is like, um, you can kind of manipulate the graveyard a little bit, where you can, like, if you have a Sarah on board, summon Morelio, search, set the trap hole card, summon, send Morelio, summon Sarah, and if you have that whole tail in the graveyard, like I said, banish it, summon back out from Morelio to pop a spell and trap. It's just absolutely free, because it's a really it's a link 1 monster that points down, which is insane. And it has 2 really solid effects, which is absolutely insane. Goes without saying. I think the debate with this is whether or not you run it at 3. And I had a lot of times in testing, because you are playing a trap deck, so you do run through your resources during a lot of the duels during playtesting. So I found the need for 3 a lot. 1 copy of Kaleria. For those who don't know, because I know I didn't see this out too often. Let me just make sure I read it verbatim correctly. The links on monsters unaffected by trap cards, obviously. You can only use each of her effects once per turn, or their effects once per turn. After you activate a trap hole a normal trap hole card, or a normal hole trap card, you can set it instead of sending it to the graveyard. And then during your end phase, you can target a Traptrix monster and you can special summon it back out. That's actually really solid. Link arrows are also really, really good. And it's relatively free. It is. It's relatively free to get out. I don't go into it too often with playtesting, but it's pretty solid. And then obviously this card's really good at finishing the duel. Link 3 monster that can pop a card. It's always pretty insane. But it also can bait out cards. It can bait out your opponent's masquerades, your redoers. I believe the cashier boss monster is one that manages face down. Like, there's a lot of different interactions that this card has, not just being able to push for game. But that's really, really solid. For the rest of the Link monsters, Unicorn, IP package, and Access Code Talker. Most people, I don't know why. A lot of people aren't playing Access Code. Insane right now. Like, Access Code is such a good card right now. If you have your Access Code, I would definitely run it in this deck. Not just because I'm running the IP Unicorn package, but also because we are running a Link 3 monster. So the fact that we can summon it out, negate an effect, pop potentially 2 or 3 cards, summon out an Access Code with maximum amount of attack, and then pop some more cards. Absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. For the Xyz, 2 Rafflesia, 1 Pingukula, and 1 Almares. Rafflesia kind of goes without saying. Rafflesia is actually a really solid card. And that first effect can't be destroyed by battle or card effects. And Traptrix monster, Traptrix monster you control can't be destroyed by card effects. It's super big, because a lot of times they try to beat over Sarah, so you can keep your Sarahs alive. Between the other 2, which one do I go into more? Is definitely Pingu Kula, but Pingu Kula is a better going first card, or like early in the duel where you're trying to get your resources. But Almaris is really good later, when you're trying to, when all your resources are in your graveyard anyway. And they obviously can trigger Sarah, which is super cool, but they are also Xyz monsters, which means we can summon a Zeus. So now we're running Zeus, we're running Access Code Talker, we're running all of the stuff. It gives me more options, right? And a lot of times too, when my opponents, if the cashier player, they're gonna look at the extra deck, they're gonna get rid of the Zeus, and I don't really care. Like, you don't really care if you lose Zeus. That's why I'm only running it at 1. There are some decks where you kind of need to run multiple Zeuses, but I'm running the Zeus. And this last card can be any generic rank 4, like Redoer, Baguska, Dweller. I just had Dweller. Honestly, I've thought about cutting the Sarah for a Baguska, because I do think Baguska is really, really good right now too. But I think Dweller's always just been a little bit better than Baguska, but I could be wrong about that type of thing. That's it for the deck profile. Let me know what you guys think in those comments down below. If you guys have any decks that you want me to do a deck profile of, make sure you guys let me know in those comments down below as well. Make sure you guys click that like button to show your support for the channel, subscribe for more content. But most importantly of all, have a good day.